Visualization is one of the most misunderstood techniques in the manifestation space. Not because it doesn't work, but because most people don't understand why it works. They think visualization is about imagining outcomes, or seeing pictures, or trying to feel excited enough that something happens. But visualization has nothing to do with fantasy. It's actually a state regulation mechanism. It works because the mind and nervous system respond to imagery faster than they can respond to logic. Before the conscious mind can argue, the nervous system has already reacted. This is why visualization has been used in psychology, therapy, and performance training long before it was ever connected to manifestation. Athletes use it, trauma therapists use it, and even behavioral conditioning and concepts use it, not to imagine success, but to condition response. At its core, visualization is not about creating something new. It's about changing the internal conditions that allow assumption to take root. And assumption does not emerge from thought, it emerges from identity. One of the clearest historical examples of this mechanism appears in the I Am teachings, through what they symbolically referred to as the violet flame. But to understand it properly, the symbolism has to be stripped away, because what's being described is not fire, not energy in a physical sense, and not something external acting upon you. It's simply a mental and emotional reorientation process. From a psychological standpoint, it represents transmutation. And transmutation means this. It means taking an account or becoming aware of your current internal state and returning yourself back to the more desirable internal state. In other words, returning yourself, including your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, back to the manifesting state, which is the state that most indicates to yourself the already nowness of your previously desired wish or manifestation. More simply put, transmutation is just a changing of states, if you will. But before you can change the state, you must be aware of what state you are currently in. Most people believe manifestation fails because they aren't visualizing clearly enough, or affirming correctly, or repeating something enough times. In reality, manifestation stalls because unresolved emotional patterns continue to reassert themselves. These unresolved emotional patterns live in the nervous system. They are not thoughts. They are conditioned responses. And they can show up as guilt, shame, regret, fear, or any sort of emotional memory. And these states quietly dictate what feels natural to assume. Visualization works when it loosens identification with these patterns, not by suppressing them, not by analyzing them, and not by trying to replace them with positive thinking, but by reducing emotional charge. This distinction matters because effort strengthens identity and release softens it. When visualization is used correctly, it signals to the mind that a pattern no longer needs to be carried forward. Not because it was wrong, not because it was bad, but because it is no longer relevant. No struggle, no self-judgment, no force. The subconscious does not respond to reasoning. It responds to symbolism, repetition, and emotional permission. That's why structured visualization works, not because of belief, but because it provides the nervous system with a signal of completion. Many people misuse visualization by turning it into performance. They visualize harder, they repeat faster, they try to feel something happen. That effort is interpreted by the nervous system as urgency, and urgency is read as lack. Effort implies resistance. Effective visualization feels ordinary, unremarkable, like closure, almost like closing all the open tabs in the mind space. There is no emotional spike. There is no sense of doing something important. You are not destroying anything. You are completing a cycle. This is why calm visualization is more effective than emotional visualization. Calm signals safety, and safety allows release. In modern psychological terms, this process aligns with what's called cognitive diffusion. Diffusion is the ability to observe a thought or emotion without merging with it. Visualization creates distance. It allows the mind to say, this emotion is present, but it is not me. This memory exists, but it does not define me. Once distance is created, identity begins to soften. And when identity softens, assumption becomes natural. Not forced, not repeated, not maintained through vigilance. This is why emotional regulation always precedes assumption. You cannot assume peace while rehearsing threat. You cannot assume abundance while rehearsing guilt. You cannot assume freedom while rehearsing self-judgment. Visualization clears emotional static, not by force, but by permission. When the I Am teachings spoke of transmutation, they were not describing morality, punishment, or cleansing. They were describing release of identification, release of emotional inertia, release of unconscious repetition. And this is why visualization works regardless of belief. You do not need to believe in symbols. You do not need to accept language literally. You only need to understand this. What you repeatedly identify with, you reinforce. What you release identification from loses power. Visualization is simply a structured way to release identification. That's why it works. That's why it endures. And that's why it belongs in a grounded manifestation practice. Not as a ritual, but as a reset. Subscribe and enter your manifesting state.